Now, today, what I want to tell you is the story of Red Shield and Running Wolf. This is a love story. It's a beautiful love story. It comes to us from the Apsaluga people who live in a part of Montana today, but out there in the Great Plains, the Apsaluga, also known as the Crow, roamed and lived, and they were bitter enemies with the Lakota. Very bitter enemies. Yeah. And it was only through heroic action that a young person of one tribe could become the friend or lover or even talk to a young person of the other tribe. But such is the story of Red Shield, the daughter of a Lakota chief, and Running Wolf, the son of an Apsaluga warrior. Now, Red Shield, she first heard of Running Wolf from a Sioux or Lakota woman who had been captured by the Apsalugas and then later was permitted to return to her own people, the Lakota. This woman had lived as a helper, servant with Running Wolf's family during the time when the boy was growing up. He was a lazy boy, the Lakota woman told Red Shield. His father had to drive him out of bed every morning by rapping his shins with a stick. And one morning, he scolded the boy very hard and told him that he should be out hunting the deer for his family. Well, that morning, as soon as the father left, Running Wolf came to me and asked if I would make a buckskin mask for him. And so I made him the mask, and he spent the day painting it with white clay and fastening deer horns to it. Well, before sunrise the next morning, he was the first person out of bed. He took his father's gun and knife and rode away on a horse he led two horses behind him. And he went out a little to a lake near the village and fastened the horses in the woods. And then he went down to a place where the animals drink. And when the sun rose, some of the deer came there to drink. But they did not run away because they thought that the boy was a deer. He killed two, loaded them on the led horses, and brought them home just as his father was waking up. Running Wolf's father had to be pleased by this, Red Shield asked. Oh, yes. He told his son that he had done very well and should divide the venison with their neighbors. But that was not the end of it. The next morning, the boy went back to the watering place and returned with two more deer. And the morning after that, he did the same. The Lakota woman smiled. That time, his father told him to stop, or he would begin to smell like deer. And what did Running Wolf say to this? She asked. He said nothing, but he began sleeping late again until one morning his father rapped him on the shins and scolded him for being lazy. His father told Running Wolf that he could no longer use the family's horses, and that if he wanted a horse to ride, he would have to go out and take one from the Nez Perce. That morning, as soon as his father went hunting, Running Wolf came to me and asked if I would make him a new set of moccasins. I did this for him, and he spent the day decorating them with paint and beads in some special way. And at sundown, he left the teepee with his gun, not saying a word to anyone. Next morning, he returned with 20 horses he had taken from the Nez Perce. His father must have been much pleased by this, said Red Shield. Oh, yes. After the boy gave him 10 of the horses, the father sang praise songs for him all day. But that was not the end of it. That night, Running Wolf went out again, and next morning he brought back 40 horses and gave them all to his father. And the next night he captured 50 horses, all of which he gave to his father. And still a fourth night he went out, and this time he brought back 80 head of horses, giving them all to his father. Oh, I can tell you, Running Wolf's father had a hard time herding all those horses. Stop, stop, he shouted at his son. You have listened too well to what I told you. Red Shield laughed. I think I like this young Running Wolf, even if he is Absaluga, she said. Oh, but he soon grew up after that, the Lakota woman said. After his father died, his mother and I made a new teepee for him, and then I was told that I could return to my people. Running Wolf painted his teepee black, tied feathers to the door, and laid war bonnets and other finery around the inside to signify that he had become a great warrior. Or at least that's what he intended to become. Not long after Red Shield heard these stories about Running Wolf, her father announced that the Lakota would be going out for their summer buffalo hunt. The tribe camped in a narrow valley down which some of their hunters would drive the buffalo, while others waited in concealment on either side to kill them as they passed. It was a busy time for Red Shield and the other women, young and old, for they helped with the skinning of the buffalo, and they stretched the hides out to dry in the sun. A lot of work. One afternoon, while half the Lakota hunters were out searching for a buffalo herd, an alarm sounded suddenly through the camp. Absaluga horse thieves are coming! Look to the horses! As soon as the men drove the horses in, it was the duty of the women and children to guard them while the warriors went out to protect the camp from the Absaluga raid. Red Shield mounted her spotted pony and joined the other women. Far up the level valley, she could see the dust of the oncoming Absaluga as they raced toward the line of defending Lakotas. A moment later, she heard the sharp war cries of the contending warriors. She saw one of the Absaluga warriors on a black horse break through the Lakota line and come charging toward the horse herd that she was helping to guard. Not far behind him, 2 Lakota warriors galloped in pursuit, and as the Absaluga came nearer, she could see that he wore 4 eagle feathers in his hair. Fastened behind his belt was a streamer of black leather, long enough to trail on the ground. His horse's mane and tail were whitened with clay. He carried a black-handled spear decorated with bunch of crow feathers, and this weapon was pointed straight at Red Shield. She held her spotted horse steady, defying the onrushing Absaluga, and at the last moment he reined in the black horse so that the point of the spear was just an arm's length away from her body. The young Absaluga's face was painted with streaks of black and white, and for a moment he glared at Red Shield, and then he threw back his head and laughed. By this time, his pursuers had caught up with him. One of the Lakota put an arrow to his bow, but he missed. Then both of them closed in upon the Absaluga with their war clubs raised, ready to strike. Dancing his black horse in a circle, the Absaluga used his spear to knock first one, then the other, Lakota, off of their mounts. His horse pawed the earth and then sprang like a cat into the Lakota horse herd. Before Red Shield or her companions could move, the Absaluga had cut 6 horses out of their herd and was chasing off with them off into the valley. Angry and frustrated because she could do nothing to stop the daring Absaluga, Red Shield watched him go. Then the young man turned and waved a farewell to her. Above the pounding hooves, she could hear his laughter, and her indignation turned to grudging admiration. A group of Lakota warriors swept by intent upon pursuit, but Red Shield's father called them back. "Too many of our hunters are away," he said. "We are too few to risk leaving our women and children and the horse herd open to another raid." "Did you see that Absaluga?" cried an old Lakota medicine man. "He and his horse are under some powerful magic." The Lakota woman, who had once been a captive among the Absaluga, spoke up from the front of her teepee. "I know that one," she said. "What name does he go by?" the medicine man asked. "Yes, who is he?" demanded Red Shield's father. "Running Wolf, he is called." Red Shield, who still sat on her spotted horse, whispered to herself, "Running Wolf. I knew he must have been Running Wolf." Not long after that, the Lakota returned to their village on the Missouri River. It seemed to all the young men in the tribe that suddenly the chief's daughter, this same Red Shield, had suddenly become a great beauty, and one by one they came by the chief's teepee to ask if she would marry them. Red Shield's father encouraged her to choose one of the suitors for a husband, but she wanted none of them. One evening, after she had rejected a handsome young warrior, her father demanded to know why she was so obstinate. "Because I love him," she cried, and in a fit of anger she threw her supper into the fire. "If you love someone else," her father said patiently, "then tell me his name." "I love only Running Wolf," she replied. "I want to marry him." "You cannot marry Running Wolf. He is an Absaluga, and the Absaluga are our enemies." Her father thought that would put an end to it. But days passed without Red Shield saying a word, and she ate so little that she began to grow thin. At last he realized that his daughter was determined to marry Running Wolf, or else she herself would die. "Very well," the chief said at last. "You at least are a woman of courage. You do not know if Running Wolf wants you for a wife, but you are determined to test him." The next morning, the chief brought around 2 fine horses, a mule, and some packs filled with moccasins and other presents. He summoned the Lakota woman who had once been a captive of the Absaluga and told her to go with Red Shield until they found the Absaluga camp where this Running Wolf lived. They started out, and at the end of 3 days they sighted the Absaluga teepees along a little stream. They rode into a thick wood where they fastened their horses and their pack mule. Red Shield painted herself carefully and dressed in her best clothing. By this time, night had fallen, but a full moon was rising above the trees. It is time for me to go into the Absaluga camp, Red Shield said. Remember to look for that black teepee, the Lakota woman reminded her. You will see a bunch of eagle feathers fastened to the end of one of the poles. If I don't return, Red Shield whispered, you will know that Running Wolf does not want me for a wife, and that I am a prisoner of the Absalugas, just as you were. I will wait for you, the Lakota woman said. Red Shield walked out of the woods and entered the bright moonlight which flooded the Absaluga camp. And in the middle of the camp she found a black teepee with eagle feathers fastened to the top of one of the poles. No one noticed her as she walked to the open entrance. Inside, some young men were talking and smoking around a campfire. Red Shield was certain that one of them was Running Wolf. She sat down outside the entrance. After a while, each of the young men began to leave, one or two at a time, paying no particular attention to her presence at all. And then Running Wolf came out to stretch himself and yawn, and the moonlight was full in his face. And Red Shield thought her heart would beat just like a drum. It beat so strongly. He saw her then, and he said, Absaluga, come in. But Red Shield understood not one word of Absaluga, and she neither answered him nor moved. Running Wolf shrugged and went back inside, and Red Shield heard him say something else, and the voice of an old woman responded. Red Shield arose then and went into the teepee. The fire had died to just a few coals, and she could see only the shadowy forms of Running Wolf and his mother. She went close to the fire and sat down as though to warm herself. This time, the old woman spoke to her in Absaluga. Take off your moccasins and rest. But of course, Red Shield did not understand. Build up the fire so we can see this young woman, said Running Wolf. His mother placed some dry wood on the coals, and a blaze sprang up to light the inside of the teepee. This woman is not an Absaluga, cried Running Wolf's mother. No, he said, but I know who she is. Only one time have I seen her, but her face has been in my dreams many times since. She is a Lakota. Red Shield raised her head and made signs to them that she could not understand what they were saying, but she had a friend nearby who could speak for her. At last, Running Wolf understood, and he followed her across camp in the clearing to the thick woods where the Lakota woman was waiting with the horses and the mule. Running Wolf remembered the former captive of his boyhood, and when they returned to his teepee, the Lakota woman and his mother had a happy reunion. Why do you and this daughter of a Lakota chief come into our camp? The mother asked. She is Red Shield, replied the Lakota woman in Absaluga. She has brought many presents. She has come to marry your son, Running Wolf. And what does my son, Running Wolf, have to say to this? To marry one of the enemy? Running Wolf looked at Red Shield. I knew she was beautiful, and she showed courage that day I took courses from the Lakota. Now she has shown more bravery than I would have dared by coming into the camp of her enemies alone. Yes, he said, I want her for my wife. And while the Lakota woman was bringing in the packs of presents, Running Wolf's mother went through the camp. "Come, come and look at my son's wife," she cried. "One of the enemy's children has come to marry him." All the Absaloga in camp came to see Red Shield, and all said she was very good looking and a woman of great bravery. Early the next morning, the Lakota woman started back on the long journey to the Missouri River to tell the girls' people that she was safe and was now the wife of an Absaloga warrior, Running Wolf. A few days later, Red Shield's father, the Lakota chief, sent 2 messengers to the Absaloga, telling them that he and many of his relatives were coming to pay the Absaloga a friendly visit. For this event, the Absalogas moved their teepee to a larger plain beside the lake, camping at night in a tight circle so as to leave room on the outside for the visitors. The Absaloga chief told Running Wolf to put his black teepee in a place of honor in the center. When the Lakota arrived, the Absaloga surrounded them and watched them put up their teepees. After this was done, Red Shield took Running Wolf to welcome her to his parents, and they all exchanged many presents. Running Wolf brought back several guns and the horses that he had taken from the Lakota, and he gave them to Red Shield's father. And for 4 days and nights, the Lakota camped with the Absaloga, and the tribes danced together every evening. After the Lakota returned to the Missouri River, Running Wolf and Red Shield and several of their friends visited them from time to time. And in the moons of pleasant weather, her Lakota father and mother would visit their daughter, and later on to see their grandchildren. In both tribes, the young Absaloga warrior and his Lakota wife were regarded as hero and heroine, and their people lived in peace for a long time.